The following is a RackRadioShow.com exclusive.
Joining us right now is the genius behind the Headlocked comic. Everyone, please welcome to the rack, Michael Kingston. How you doing today?
Pretty good. That's a heck of a lead-in. I don't know if I'm ready for genius, but that's I appreciate the kind words.
Well, I think you're a genius. I mean, you know, this is the third installment of the series that you're coming out with, and it's this epic hit. I mean, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, and I'm very happy with how things have progressed. I mean, it's been a long road, but you know, it's definitely starting to pay off a little bit.
So I have to ask, because I've been seeing the cover image of the hand reaching for the rope, and it has me slightly worried. You know, can you kind of give us a hint as to maybe what's going on with that?
Well, since we started the series, since the very first issue, we've been sort of teasing this incident that involves Mike Hartman, our main character, that's sort of led him to the place that he is now, where he's down in Texas training, sort of hiding his identity because he's been blackballed from wrestling. So we've sort of been teasing that incident for, 3 books now, and we're going to pay that one off in this installment. So it's something we've been playing at forever, and we're gonna let people see what actually happened that fateful evening.
Oh dear, yeah, because it's like the first time it came up on because we're friends on Facebook. So the first time it came up, yeah. I was like, "What's going on? What happened?" I was seriously worried.
I like it. I mean, I think it's a real gripping promo image. I think it really gets people's attention, and it sort of epitomizes. I think in one image, it sort of epitomizes Mike's struggle to progress through the wrestling business. So I was happy with it.
Well, that's awesome that you're happy with it. That's I think the most important thing.
Screw everyone else. I'm just doing this to pop myself.
Isn't that everything though?
Right. Oh, it really is.
So, for everybody that's just kind of jumping onto the series, because I know it's gotten progressively more popular, with this one being obviously the most popular because it's the newest, and it's garnered a lot more attention since your last installment. Can you kind of maybe summarize for our listeners sort of what the series is about and kind of what's led up to this point?
So, Headlocked is the story of a theater major in college. His name is Mike Hartman, and he sort of falls in love with wrestling kind of unexpectedly. I think he has the sort of stereotypical, I don't like wrestling because it's fake attitude. And then he goes to a wrestling show sort of against his will, probably mainly to mock it. And then when he's there, he really falls in love with it. As a theater actor, he can see the pageantry and the performance art behind it. And then he gets all sucked up into that and gets bit by the wrestling bug and decides he wants to become a wrestler. And he, starts his journey through the business, and I think he's a little overconfident. I think as a lot of young people tend to be about their prospects in the world. And things don't really go his way right off the bat, and that leads him down a series of paths, to where we had this big incident, and now he's in Texas in this sort of hyper regional company, and he's learning from a retired wrestler who's making a comeback. And there's a lot of sort of intrigue as to what's going on in between the time that he sort of got off the bus and the time that he's here. But there's also his sort of progression. At the same time he's learning how to become a wrestler, he's also learning how to become a man, I guess. So it's sort of a coming-of-age story, in the insane world of professional wrestling.
That would be a hard place to become a man, I would think.
Sure, but, people do it. I see all these kids on the indies. I watch independent wrestling almost every weekend, because I'm out, slinging my books. And, I see all these young kids, fresh-faced kids getting in the ring, and, they're kick pads and their wife beaters and and just trying to make a go of it. And then one of the coolest things for me is as Headlocked has evolved for me personally, I've got to see a lot of people that were coming up when I was coming up start to get opportunities at the top of wrestling. So, we've progressed, they've progressed, and we're all still friends. So it's really kind of neat for me to see that. And, and conversely, most of those guys are very happy for my success too. So, and a lot of them have, helped contribute to the book.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you've had, from Christopher Daniels, who's worked on the series, to Finn Balor kind of put it out for you and help you along. That's got to be really cool for you.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, I've been a wrestling fan my whole life, and, a lot of the guys that, like, as a comic book fan, like Hurricane was one of my favorite wrestlers, as, younger days, and now, he's one of my better friends in the world, and that's kind of neat, and then guys like, Samoa Joe and AJ Styles, the Young Bucks, we would all see each other, on the indies over selling stuff, while I'm selling my books, and they're working matches, and we all get to be friends, and, now they're tearing it up, on the highest levels of the business, and it's really cool.
I mean, it sounds like it, because what's that? I think those friendships have maybe helped you sort of attract sort of these all-stars to this project too, because like I said, you had Christopher Daniels last time, you've had the Young Bucks do something for this, now you have Ric Flair and Kenny Omega and Mick Foley and Cody Rhodes joining you on this project, and Jerry Lawler's returned as well. I mean, sort of, what was it like to work with them on this project? It's
been cool. I just come from Seattle. We did Emerald City Comic Con this weekend, and Rick was my guest at the booth, and doing pictures and autographs and promoting the book. And after the show, we got to sit down and work out a story, and it's a great story. And I think people are going to be very surprised by the story that we worked out. And I also think I don't think what people are necessarily going to expect from a Ric Flair, story, but it's cool, and I'm happy with it. And the story that Mick and I did was we're doing a Christmas story for the book, as you can imagine, and that one is
because it's Mick Foley.
It's very fun. And then Cody and Kenny, we haven't done our stories yet, but Cody's been somebody I wanted to work with since the beginning. From the minute that I knew that he wasn't going to be under a WWE contract, he was like right at the top of the list of guys I wanted to work with. And, same with Kenny. I actually bumped like a really big name off of this book to the next book so I could get Kenny on this book, because I was so excited to be able to work with him. So it's been really cool, and it's been really fun. And all these guys are super, super creative, and they have to be successful in the business. You have to have some level of creativity. I was backstage at the final 2CW show maybe 2 years ago when they closed down, and I was sort of in the mix there watching Kenny and the Young Bucks put together their main event match, and it was pretty fun to sort of get to toss in a couple ideas here and there, and to see it all then play out on the stage. So it's cool. All those guys they all have the soul of a storyteller. Even they all do. They tell their stories in the ring. They're able to manipulate the crowd. It's just a different form of storytelling, but that's all. That's primarily what all these guys do. Whether it's in the ring or from town to town, they tell stories. Just a different extension.
Because this is fascinating to me. How much of it, when you guys come up with the story and you work out something for the comic, how much of it is them versus how much is it you? Is it like 50-50? Does it depend?
Mostly, I sit down with them, and then they start pitching ideas to me, and then I try to find an idea that I can adapt to a character in the Headlocked universe, and then from there we'll sort of, come up with that macro idea, and then we'll fill in some of the holes, and then I do the, obviously the panel breakdowns and the scripting, and then I will send it to them, and then they'll give me, some notes from there, and then we'll polish, and then it's done. So, a lot of and it's different for different people too, you know what I mean? That's primarily how it's worked out for a lot of people, but Christopher Daniels wrote me a prose story that I adapted, and Frankie Kazarian actually wrote his own sort of comic book script page by page. Mick wrote a prose story for me. Samoa Joe and I sat down for, I don't know, like an hour and a half at a restaurant in Albany, while he was telling me stories, and, it's different for every guy, because everybody works differently, but they all have a fair amount of input in it, and it's definitely their story.
Is that kind of what attracts them to the project? I mean, do you kind of have to go up to them and say, hey, I'm working on this really awesome thing. Do you want to be a part of it? Or has it gotten to the point now where people are contacting you to join in?
It's funny. It actually started with people, it wasn't even my idea to begin with. When I started, I didn't have anybody attached to the book. It was just me selling comics and artist alleys and stuff. And a lot of the wrestlers had come by, because they were at Comic-Con as fans. So, Hurricane bought my book at San Diego Comic-Con. Rob Van Dam bought my book from San Diego Comic-Con. And Christopher Daniels bought a book for me at New York Comic-Con. And, these guys are like, oh, I'd really love to do something for this. And, once, Kickstarter became, a viable thing, I sort of connected the dots, and I was like, man, we should do it like this. And then, a lot of the guys that like comics, they'll find me. I mean, there was a particular wrestler, I didn't even know they were released, and they had already hit me up through Twitter. It was like, hey, I want to do a story for your book. So, I mean, it's pretty neat to have that sort of cachet in the business. I mean, it's funny because, in comics, in a lot of ways in comics, I barely exist, although that is starting to change a little bit, but in wrestling I have a decent reputation with a lot of people, and it makes me happy because like I said, I've been a fan forever, so to earn the respect of these guys is a real badge of honor for me.
You say in a lot of ways maybe you're following your character's story too, just in a different route.
And I think what it is about Headlocked that to me resonates with everybody is it's a story of a kid following his dream. And, I write it so you don't have to be a wrestling fan to understand what's going on. I try to make it as accessible as possible, because people will say to me, they'll be like, well, I don't really watch wrestling. And I'm like, I bet you don't really watch boxing either, but you probably watch Rocky. So,
yeah,
the idea of it being a sort of a universal story, and a lot of Mike Hartman is my journey. I mean, it's not obviously as painful to break into comics as it is wrestling. I mean, at least physically, but a lot of the ups and downs and the sort of self-doubt and things that you go through, when you try to sort of put yourself out there and do something that's off the beaten path, that's a lot of that is universal. I think if you're, whether you're, wandering around Nashville with a guitar, or, you're a girl that just got off a bus in Hollywood to become an actress, or any of it, I think everybody I think the struggle is the same for everyone. It's just the details change a little bit.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Now, you mentioned Emerald City Comic-Con. You were just there. How was it? Did you have fun?
Always have fun. I mean, as people who follow me on my social media know, I'm a rather prolific food nut. So, Seattle's actually one of my favorite cities to eat in, which is excellent. And the show itself was a big success. I mean, last year was the first year we did it. We'd been trying to get into that show for 6 years, and finally last year was the first year we broke through. And I had Jerry last year, and it was our second best show of the year behind New York. And then this year it was our first show of the year, and it was a huge success. I mean, as you can imagine, having Ric Flair, it both draws a fair amount of traffic, and then obviously the lineup that we've put together for the Kickstarter has drawn a lot of attention. So, I mean, we did have a very successful show, and, for lifelong wrestling fans, just getting to hang out with Ric Flair and being treated, I guess, as an equal, or, not being treated like a mark or whatever is a real kind of a neat thing. So, yeah,
that would be pretty awesome, I have to admit. I mean, just to get to hang out with him and be viewed on a level with him, same level with him, yeah, that would be cool. Just from a fan's point of view, be like, yeah, this is awesome.
Well, I mean, I'm still a fan. I mean, that's never changed. I mean, it's funny because a lot of people, once you get too far into something, sometimes I think, once you can see how the sausage is made, so to speak, you tend to lose your enthusiasm for things. But I mean, I'm still a huge wrestling fan, and I know that I've been very, very lucky. I've had a lot of things go my way to get where I'm at, and I've worked extremely hard, and I don't discount any of that. But I mean, a lot of the guys, I've been very lucky. I mean, Jerry Lawler answered a cold email from me 8 years ago, never having heard of me, never having known me, took a cold email off his website and decided to he was given an opportunity when he was younger to have his art showcased on Memphis television, and that's eventually how he indirectly sort of how he broke into wrestling. And so he decided to pay that forward by answering a cold email from an aspiring comic book creator and agreeing to do covers for me, which to this day still to me is insane, that happened. And that we're such good friends now. But, you know what I mean? Like, I've had a lot of things go my way, the right way, so I never try to lose sight of that. I'm a couple of breaks one way or the other from being, still in Artist Alley, still selling my comics and, not having half the visibility that I have.
Yeah. I still love the Norman Rockwell inspired covers he did for the last go round. Those are still so neat because they're so different. You
always want to try to give your artist something that excites them. And it's funny because, everybody knows Jerry from his public persona, but he's like the biggest art nerd. And so like, we'll go to towns and we'll go to museums and stuff. And I've been to more art museums with Jerry Lawler than any other human being in my life. And, anytime I live about 40 minutes from the Norman Rockwell Museum, so whenever Jerry was in town for Raw, or when it was in Albany, we would go to the museum and just spend the day. And it's funny because it's the one place that, he doesn't get bothered because I don't think people, either think it's him or expect it's him or, it's probably not the, huge cross audience. But we went to Stockton Con 2 years ago, and there was an art museum in Stockton that has the largest collection of J.C. Leyendecker, who was the cover artist on the Saturday Evening Post before Rockwell and kind of his mentor. And they had all this original artwork, and they let us go down in the basement and like the archives and like look through all this these files and stuff of all these like sketches he had done. And, not even fully formed pieces of art, like, and it was really, really super, it was super cool. And like, Jerry's, just, really excited to look at this art and to, pour through all these old sketches and stuff. And it was fun. It was neat. But, it's an odd, the way I know him is not the same way that other people know him, I guess.
But that's really cool to have those experiences and to, be able to go to an art museum and see the process and just see it, experience that because, it's like you can go to an art museum, you can look at the pictures and it's like, yeah, they're pretty. But when you go with somebody that loves it, it's a completely different experience.
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. I go to art museums occasionally with my wife, and she is not quite the same aficionado. So she'd be like, okay, we saw it, let's go. And I just want to sit there and stare at like brush strokes and, composition and all of that. So it definitely helps to have an interested companion.
Well, and I think people kind of discount the Saturday Evening Post stuff and comics and magazines in general as an art form because they're like, oh, it's not like classic art. It's just, it's a cover or it's an article or it's something that people don't understand. It all ties together. It all comes together. It's the same kind of principles as what is up on the wall. It's like a comic book is art because of what it is. And people, I don't think, see that.
Oh, no. My good buddy Shane Helms always says, if somebody paints a picture, that's art. If somebody writes a book, that's art. Because you put it together, that's just for kids.
Yeah.
It's such a a weird way of thinking, but comics and wrestling both have so many like sort of the same misconceptions or attitudes about them. Like, some of the best stories I've ever read have been comics. People still largely think of comics as superheroes, but Walking Dead was a comic book. Road to Perdition was a comic book, but no one's like, oh, that's a comic book movie. They're like, it's just a movie. But Wolverine's a comic book movie, or Green Lantern's a comic book movie. But like, people don't think of Ghost World or History of Violence. But all those started as comic books. It's just the industry's so dominated by superheroes. It's kind of the same way. Or, wrestling, that sort of WWE sort of dominates the aesthetics. So, people don't necessarily know, like, that it's different all over the world, or something like Chikara wouldn't even register to a wrestling fan because WWE's got such a stranglehold, in terms of public awareness or public perception of what wrestling is. So it's just about expanding people's minds as to what the art form can be. I mean, part of my struggle with getting Headlocked into the mainstream is the fact that I'm just doing a straight drama and not doing a superhero book or a sci-fi book or a horror book. I mean, that's always been one of the largest complaints that I've heard from people. You know, when I was pitching it, was like, it's not a genre enough. But a good story is a good story, and it shouldn't matter how it's presented. So that's been my belief, and that's what I keep pushing.
Well, I mean, not genre enough. There are different types of genres. It doesn't have to be one particular thing. I mean, I think that's
I agree, but comics is basically, horror, sci-fi, fantasy, superhero. I mean, that's, there's a small section of romance comics that, but I mean, it took a long time for even like Westerns. I mean, there weren't any Western comics. There weren't, and there's some now, but I mean, it's a tricky business, and like people don't understand. Like when you go to a comic book store, like comics is the only medium that's not sorted by genre. It's sorted by publisher, or it's sorted alphabetically. So if you see Walking Dead on TV and you're like, hey, I want to go read those comics, and you go to the comic store, you're going to find other books from Image, which aren't necessarily horror books, or you're going to find other books that begin with a W, which who knows what they are. So, it's very hard sometimes that people always say like, hey, how come the comic books don't get so many new readers when, the film properties are so popular? But that's part of it. There's no real genre connection. So, the publishers have such a stranglehold on the perception of the industry that it's very hard to get people, away from superheroes when 80% of what's on the rack are, superheroes. You're looking at this giant rack of colors. It's really, really hard to just randomly pick something up that's not a superhero book, or something that has like a spaceship on the front, or something that grabs your attention. So it's definitely a tricky animal to try to push a straight drama, but I feel like we're getting there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because your Kickstarter, for instance, I mean, has been so far, and it hasn't been up, a week? I think you opened it on Friday last week, so it hasn't even been 7 days yet. You're already halfway to your goal. A little bit over, actually. I mean, that had to feel really good that, within 48 hours you were halfway there. No,
it's definitely heartening. And I mean, I've worked really hard to try to educate the fan base that, this is the way to support the books. And, we give the people who support us on Kickstarter the best content. So, I mean, if you buy a Headlocked comic from me off my web store, or if you buy it from me at a convention, it's got 5 chapters of Headlocked, and that's cool. But if you get it through Kickstarter, you get stories from wrestlers and art from wrestlers that you can't get anywhere else. So for instance, for this book that we're doing, we have Flair and Foley and Cody Rhodes and Kenny Omega doing stories, and that's only available to the Kickstarter backers. So, if you buy this edition of the Hardway from me at a comics, at a comic convention, it won't have that content, because Kickstarter is like the lifeblood of our franchise. That's how we, when a comic book drops at a comic book store, like, they need to sell enough books to cover the production costs. So instead of doing that, we do it through Kickstarter, and so it's like our pre-order for us. But because that's what I need people to support the Kickstarter, to get the book through Kickstarter instead of, like, oh, I'll get you the next time I see it at a show, or I'll order it whenever. This sort of helps us sell enough books in the pre-order period to fund the production of the book. So it's been a very necessary thing, and I'm very happy the way people have sort of responded.
Did you get any takers on your Goldberg offer from Sunday night? I'm just kind of curious, because I saw you threw that up there.
It went pretty quick. Usually I do little things like that because they say, with a Kickstarter, like, they say 30% of your business happens at the beginning, in the first 2 or 3 days. 30% of your business will happen in the last day, and then you have the other 55 days. And it's just a giant lull where you're sort of trickling in. And so, I periodically do random things like that just to spur investment, or just to get people to pay attention, or, look our way. So, it works. It's effective, because sometimes people just won't pledge until the end, no matter how much of a, And they don't get charged. You're not charged until the campaign is over, so it's not even an issue of like waiting to have the money. Sometimes it's just an issue of, it's never going to be anybody's most important thing to do. So, you just find a way to try to incentivize people. So like we have early adopter pricing for people who back it early. I mean, I think we still have a few spots open to where, people, if they back it now, they'll get it for $5 cheaper than they would if they back it later. So, but even that still is, people will just wait till the end because that's how people are, and so it's tricky. It's you just try to find ways to get people's attention. So
I know I saw that Sunday night and that just made me laugh. That was amazing. I have to tell you that because it's like wow, that's awesome. Because I think you kind of like echoed everybody's sentiments, and that's kind of all we're gonna say on that. But you kind of echoed.
Yeah,
everybody.
no, I get it. I mean, I understand. I see it from both sides. I mean, I still wish that the match hadn't gone like it went, but I mean, it is what it is. Unfortunately, you got to do what your buying public wants. And, I mean, everybody, when you listen to the sort of conversation that's around TVs and movies, everybody's always like, hey, I'm so sick of sequels and reboots and whatever. Can we get original stuff? But then when people make original stuff, everybody goes and sees the sequels and the remakes and the reboots. So, there's this sort of prevailing sentiment that people want a certain thing. But, I mean, I would gather that Bill Goldberg's probably going to sell more merchandise at WrestleMania weekend than Kevin Owens. Whether that's right, wrong, or whatever, I mean, it is what it is. And that's unfortunately what people say isn't always what they do. So... Right. Or what people believe about themselves. People probably like to think that they support original content and support, whatever, but then they're like, oh, this was from my childhood. I'm going to go see the 14th Ninja Turtle remake that I hate because I hate Michael Bay, but so what? So,
but it's nostalgia, the cash in on the nostalgia versus, hey, there's this new original thing that's super cool and really well done and awesome, but, no, I'm not going to go see that. I'm going to go see this instead. Yeah, I completely understand.
And you see it right now, there's a big wave of it with like 90s kids just, it's all Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles and, whatever. There's a big wave of 90s nostalgia that's definitely people are cashing in on. So, this is just also reflective of wrestling. So, it's trickier to do because not a lot of guys stay in that kind of shape. But I will say this about Bill Goldberg. He is, having met him, I hosted a panel with him in Miami in 2015, and he picked me up against my will. I'm a 250-pound guy. I'm not a little dude. I'm about 6'1". We did the panel together, and we went to take a picture, and I reached my hand out, to sort of shake his hand for the picture, and he just fireman carried me against my will. I did not help him. He just picked me up, and then he made a fist with one hand. He held me on his shoulders with one arm and made a fist and took a picture. And, I played football for 15 years. Like I said, I'm not a little dude at all. And he handled me like I was a child. So, there is a real sort of charisma about him, like when you're close to the man, that I think is very, I don't know, it's a very real and visceral thing that I would argue, I'm friends with a lot of guys, and a lot of guys don't have that. Even some of my best friends, there's a certain, I don't know if it's some weird alpha male thing or whatever, but like, it's a real thing. And it, like when you're standing next to Bill Goldberg, like you want Bill Goldberg to like you, like and it's a hard thing to put into words, but it's definitely a real and visceral thing. So whatever people think of his in-ring performance, there is a definite an it factor that he has that not a lot of people do have.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to have, and we can call it it. He has it.
Yeah, charisma, whatever. But that's what people respond to. Like ultimately, people respond to personalities more than anything else. I remember, for a period of time, like Kimbo Slice was the most watched UFC fighter or, MMA fighter. And he was not a skilled fighter at all, but he had a persona and, people respond to personality beyond everything else. And it's, it's something that a lot of guys, I feel like, I don't know. As a fan, you want to see, a great in-ring performance, and you want to see, moves and exciting stuff. But I think it's personality that That's why we talk about the cash me outside girl, you know? I mean, it's ridiculous, but I mean, you know, she's getting a whole bunch of money for appearances now, or, you know what I mean? Because, I mean, personality sells above all other things. It's just whatever that is, you know, that it factor. That's the thing that moves the dial.
Yeah, and you can't blame somebody for having that. You really can't. You know,
No, I mean, I think everybody wants it. I mean, everybody wants to be that guy. You know what I mean? Like that guy in the room or that girl in the room that everybody else, you know what I mean? I think that's just something that's, you know, wired into your sort of animal brain from, you know, years ago of wanting to be, you know, the thing that everybody wants to reproduce with, I guess, you know, for lack of a better term. But, you know, everybody, that sort of animal wiring of wanting to be the, you know, the pack leader, the, you know, the most desirable, you know, thing. So, I mean, it's, you know, good on them for having that, you know, having that and figuring out a way to cash that in, because it's definitely something that not a lot of people have. And I mean, there have been a lot of ex-football players or ex-whatever that were just, you know, wet noodles out there, you know, and he figured it out, whatever it was, you know. I mean, I'm sure the booking helped, but I mean, you could book 1 million guys like that and they don't get over the way he got over. So it's definitely more than just that.
Yeah, because I feel like, you know, there's a certain when people look at wrestling, they feel like there's a certain type, you know, like you have to be this big muscular dude, and people tend to forget that, you know, especially, or they don't know because they don't necessarily watch it, that, you know, a lot of those guys that they throw out there that are those types don't necessarily work because they lack either skill, or they lack the charisma, or they can't talk, or, you know, there's something else that's sort of holding them back. It's like they look great, they look awesome, but, you know, it's not there. And for Goldberg, it's like he has the look, but also it's like you said, he has the charisma to sort of attract people to him.
Because I think there's certain types of there's more than one type of wrestling fan. Obviously, I mean wrestling fans as a group, but I mean, I think like there are people who are fans of wrestling and will watch wrestling no matter what is on. And I think those are the people that tend to be, you know, the work rate fans, or, you know, the people who appreciate the performances. And then I think the difference between, you know, like when, say, wrestling is drawing like a 4.0 rating or a 3.0 rating or whatever, like you have the, I guess for lack of a better term, the sort of the dude bros who get into like certain personalities, like, you know, like Steve Austin, or, you know, or a guy like Bill Goldberg, or whatever, like that sort of real alpha male personality that attracts those guys. They aren't necessarily there all the time. Like to me, that's the difference between, you know, that sort of like casual fan that, you know, that comes in and out of wrestling based on the character. Because, you know what I mean? Like if you're you know, the Daniel Bryan fans weren't turning off the channel when Daniel Bryan wasn't getting pushed. You know, they were pissed about it, but they weren't turning the channel. You know, it's that, you know, that sort of 3.0 rating is always going to be there. It's the, you know what I mean? It's who's driving it from 3 to 4. Like who are the casuals, and who do they turn in to see? And unfortunately, that's the, you know, why wrestling will always sort of, I guess, chase that, because they know the Daniel Bryan fans aren't going anywhere. You know, they've been here through all this, and, you know, or the CM Punk fans or whoever, you know what I mean? They're still there. They're still giving them their money. So, you know, unfortunately, you're always going to look for that audience that isn't giving you your money, and you're going to try to appeal to them. So, you know, it's sort of the sequel reboot argument all over again, but you know what I mean? You vote with your dollar, and any business, you know, that wants to stay in business is always going to, you know, focus on the people that aren't giving them their money and trying to change that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think people forget that about a lot of things, but especially wrestling, that at the end, you know, at least for WWE's model, maybe not for everybody, but for at least WWE, it is a business. They're only interested in really making money. So, you know, until the cash flow kind of shifts in a different direction, they're not going to change. So I think people yell.
And that's what it is. I mean, if you like a guy, you got to buy his shirts. You got to spend money on them, you know? I mean, that's the kids spend money on John Cena. Their parents spend money on John Cena for kids, and that's why John Cena is where he is. And I mean, you know, people bought a lot of CM Punk's merch, and that's what got Punk to where he was. I mean, ultimately, in as much as you want it to just be a based on skill and performance, it is really about who's spending money. I mean, and I see it on my end. I mean, people tell me all the time, hey, I like what you're doing, whatever, but I mean, there's, what I mean? Like, there's a difference between people that, respect you, and then there's people who, financially support you, because, I mean, and obviously not everybody can, but I mean, those are the people you have to deal with or to court, because, what I mean? At the end of the day, you got to be able to fund what you're doing and to make it happen. So, I mean, even for me, like, I'm not trying to get rich off of Headlocked. I don't ever expect Headlocked to be my regular job. I just want to be able to sell enough books to keep it going. But, if you're in WWE and that's how you pay your electric bill, it's a different level of, I guess, operation. I mean, I can make artistic choices based on, because I don't need this to put food on my table, but, I have a lot of friends that are full-time artists. So, I mean, every choice they make has to necessarily, has to be more commercial in nature, just because that's how they provide.
Yeah. It's like you do the stuff that it's like for, because I work in advertising, but I'm also an artist. So it's like I have to do, it's like I have to do the commercial stuff for my job, and that pays the bills. And, you put the personal stuff on side because you have to pay the bills, and you can go back to the personal stuff later. So it's like people I think don't necessarily understand that. It's like, because I see a lot of artists get like crap online because, they're so commercial, or, they only do this one way. And it's like, people don't understand that's what sells. That's how they make their money.
Right. And finally, I find that a lot of the people who tend to be the most critical are the ones who aren't spending the money. I mean, the worst thing for me is a guy that illegally downloads a movie and then craps on it online. Like, not only have you not given them money, like, you're discouraging other people from going too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you've paid your money, I guess you've earned the right. But, like, I mean, the people who, like, steal something illegally and then bury it, like, that's a horrible thing.
Yeah. It's like, it's like you didn't pay for it. So you kind of, it's like you can be opinionated about it, but you really shouldn't, be bashing it because you didn't pay for it.
So that's a whole nother, the digital age has definitely made it a lot harder for artists, because, I mean, so much stuff just gets ripped now, or, I mean, there was a whole segment of artists that go to Comic-Cons that are just ripping scans and, like, sort of just putting them through a filter and then trying to pass it off as their own artwork. And, artists are sort of fighting back against that, and Comic-Cons are starting to recognize that. But I mean, for a long time, there's these guys that are, hey, look, I took a Jim Lee Captain America and I, added a splatter filter over it, and now I'm selling it. So,
yeah.
There's a lot of that. I mean, the digital age has made it a lot harder for artists. And I mean, in a lot of ways, it's made it easier too, I mean, Headlocked wouldn't exist without the internet, because the traditional methods of gatekeeping in comics would have always kept me out. But, it has made things a lot harder for artists too at the same time.
Yeah, I would agree with that 110%. So I have one last question for you, because I know we've been talking a while, and I'm sure you've got some places you need to go and places you need to be. And, I have to know this because it's just too cool to me. What was it like for you to win your very first wrestling championship last year when you became the DDT Iron Man heavy metal weight champion?
It's pretty fun. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I tell everybody that I'm a Japanese wrestling champion. I mean, it's funny. My wife kind of like cringes sometimes, but he's just been waiting to tell you about that. But it was fun, and it was a great experience. That whole weekend was just an unbelievable good time, and it's funny because the belt's back in Japan now, and I've had wrestlers, famous wrestlers, tell me, like, man, I was so jealous when you won that belt. Like, I wish I could have won that belt. And I find that to be super amusing. But now I can say that we're the most decorated team in comics. I mean, I've got my belt, and Mikkel has won wrestling titles, and Jill Thompson has 7 Eisners, and Jerry has 168 world titles. So I defy any other team in comics to put their accolades up against our team.
It's a resume builder, and you can't beat that. That's for sure.
We're like the 4 horsemen of comics now.
There you go. 4 horsemen, the 4 kings.
Yes.
Well, 3 kings, 1 queen,
The funniest part about that whole thing was, not to break kayfabe here, but, we had Joey was at the booth for one day, so we taped like 5 title changes and then spaced it out. He sort of released them little by little, and I think I was like the 3rd one. So like, I didn't even know it had aired. Like, I learned that it had aired when somebody like ran up to the table and was like, "Hey, you still got that belt?" Like, I think he thought he was going to try and take it from me.
You're like, no.
I was like, I don't know, dude. I lost that. I had that belt for like 13 seconds.
But it's in the history books. It's legit. It's there.
It is. I mean, I'm on the Wikipedia and everything. I mean, it's pretty fun.
That's awesome. Well, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been super fun to talk to you as always. I wish you nothing but the best with Headlocked. And everybody, you can check it out on Kickstarter. Go to Kickstarter.com. You can look it up by Headlocked Comic, or any variation therein. It'll pull up donate. Get this thing going because it's an awesome series.
And I do want to say one thing is that
Sure.
we're at 12 something right now. When we get to $15,000, we're going to put up a stretch goal. And it's another pretty big name that I think is going to get people excited. So let's just, we're I think it's like 65% now. We should if we can get to 75%, the sooner we get there, the sooner I can announce our stretch goal. I'm very excited about it, and it's gonna be pretty cool.
Yeah, I may have to up my donation to get us there because that sounds exciting.
It's a good name, and it's somebody that I've wanted to work with for a little while, and I felt like it wasn't going to be able to happen, but recent changes in that person's status is now going to make it happen, and it fits perfectly in with our sort of 4 kings and 1 ace sort of promo campaign that we're doing. So I can't wait to announce it because I think it's going to be exciting.
Well, best of luck to you.
Thank you so much.